could do another cool thing with our layout in CSS3, and that is using columns. Now, basically, it's almost like if you were to read a book, or more specifically, a newspaper or magazine, and the text, the body text flows into multiple columns while continuing the paragraph. And it's not separate. So for example, if you had 3 columns of text, it wasn't one paragraph in one column, another paragraph in the second, and a third in the third. It's if you had this entire body text here split into 3 columns. That's kind of what I'm talking about here. Because most certainly you can create 3 columns, so 3 separate divs, float them all left, and then have each div have separate text. But what if you wanted the text, just the one big paragraph, to flow in 3 columns, no matter the width, and you're not using floats or anything like that? You can do that in CSS3. So to get you started, start a new HTML file called columns.html. You know the whole drill here. Add your title, copy the basic structure, normalize, add your custom CSS, the IE conditional comment there. You won't have to type any of this out if you just copy and paste from a previous HTML file. And in the body, we're just going to add an H1 and a big paragraph tag with just a lot of text in it. You can use whatever text you want. You can use lorem ipsum, hipster ipsum. You could just type whatever you want. And you're good to go. So in your style.css, just add a new section here just to work with. And we're just going to call it columns. And let me just show you the very basics of how this works. So I'm going to give this paragraph an ID of columns. Let's say 3-columns. And down here in my CSS, I'm going to select the ID of 3-columns. And in here, I'm going to use the CSS3 property column count. And I'm going to say 3. Now, if you didn't see a change, don't worry, because this is one of those CSS3 properties that aren't fully compatible in all browsers. In fact, it's quite a tricky one that you need to understand that doesn't work all across all browsers. But for the WebKit and Mozilla browsers, you can use the browser prefixes in order to make this work. But keep in mind that Internet Explorer 10 is the only version that works with CSS3 columns. So if you wanted WebKit to work, you just say WebKit column count, and that looks like this. So you got -WebKit -column -count, and then 3. If you're using Mozilla browser, -moz -column -count, and then 3. So that'll give you everything you need. This, you type that in your CSS. WebKit, Mozilla, and whatever works with just the default CSS3 will give you your 3 columns. So there you go. You have just basic 3 columns right there. And you can see if I resize this browser, the text will flow into its respective column no matter the width. Pretty cool. And if I were to select the text, it will just automatically flow into the next column. So that's a neat trick that you can use in CSS3. There are other properties that you can actually use with these columns, and it's good to show you. It's worth noting and showing you how to use them. So you have and I'm going to use the browser prefixes here because obviously that's important. We have another one called the column gap. And that is just the pixels that you want in between each column. So I could say 100 pixels, or actually let's use something smaller like 20 pixels. And I'm going to have to use the browser prefixes here as well because I can't see it unless I use the browser prefix. Whoops, I need to change this to column gap. And you can see here if I added 50 pixels, now I have 50 pixels of column gap. If I wanted it smaller, I can use say 10, and then this column gap would be 10 pixels. If I wanted it to be 0, then that column gap would be 0 pixels. And so that's how that one works. Again, you should use your browser prefixes here. So we've got moz column -gap and then 10 pixels and then column gap 10 pixels. So they're all consistent. And there we go. So we've got our column gap. And now another one is the column rule style. Now that's almost like adding a border in between your columns. So let's just see what that looks like. So column rule style. We can use like the border, so we can do dash, dotted, double, so on and so forth. We're going to say solid. And again, you're going to need to use your browser prefixes here. So WebKit column style solid. Sorry, we've got to add rule style. Lots of text here. So WebKit column rule style. You probably won't see this. There you go. Yeah, you can. And if you wanted to change the style of that, the color, for example, or the width, we can go WebKit column rule width and say 1 pixel. And that'll get us a 1 pixel rule there. And again, you're going to want to make sure that this is cross-browser compatible. Moz column rule width, same deal. And then column rule width. Until all the browsers are up to speed with CSS3, unfortunately, you're going to have to do these browser prefixes because it is what it is. You know, if you want it to work across as many browsers as possible, it's important that you use your browser prefixes. Moz column rule width solid. So there we go. You can see we got lots of CSS just to give us some columns here. Now I'm going to add more column gap here. I'm just going to say 40 pixels in between the column gaps here to give us more space. Now you can also change the column rule color. So we got the WebKit column rule color, and we could do something like, let's go FC3. And you could see the color there. Or if you wanted it to be something a little more subtle, like DDD. There you go. Or if you wanted the column rule style to be dashed, you could do that, and that would have a dashed column rule style. Let me make that a bit darker there for you. You could see, you know, it kind of has a neat style there. So I'm just going to add, make sure these are all consistent. And same here, Moz column rule color 333, and then column rule color 333. And so those are your columns in CSS3. Now keep in mind that this doesn't work in all browsers, and if your design is very specifically dependent on the column layout, and you're using exclusively CSS3 to achieve that, then you're going to run into some issues when your client is viewing your columns or your design on a browser that doesn't play nice, like Internet Explorer or a really old version of Firefox. So you're going to have to find backup ways to do that using divs and floats, or just understand that you cannot use and rely on this sort of layout in older browsers. It's just the way it is right now. So those are your CSS3 columns.